In this video, we're going to be taking a look at 4.1, which talks about order of operations. But all of investigation 4 is the accumulation of everything we've done and all of the properties that we've learned so far in this unit and putting them together. Remember, this is one big long story, and this story has different parts, and these parts work together to tell the same thing. So these properties of numbers are unchanging. Just remember that as we go through, when I multiply two numbers together that are negative, it's always going to be positive, whether those are decimals, whether those are fractions. Same is true for division, right? And now we're going to be studying the order in which you have to perform these operations in order to so that mathematics and those properties hold true, so that the system doesn't break. Okay, so we have talked about, or I'm sure that you've heard about, the order of operations, and this right here is kind of a checklist. You first do the parentheses, then you do the numbers with the exponents, then you do multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, and both of those are in order from left to right. Your teacher in the past may have introduced you to something called PEMDAS, right, which represents exactly what you're doing here. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. The problem with this is that with multiplication, division, right, that's just left to right. So sometimes it could be division first. It just depends. Same with addition, subtraction, that you work that left to right. Sometimes subtraction could come first. It just really depends on the problem itself. So if you don't have these down, write these down. So take a minute. This is the intro to investigation 4. We're going to be talking about the order of operations, but I want you to have these down in your notes before we move on. So pause the video for as long as you need to so that we can move on from here. So what the order of operation allows us to do is to compute or process long strings of computations. When you're adding, you're subtracting, you have exponents, you're dividing, all kind of mixed in there. Also the parentheses, remember that's the first thing that you would do. So in this case, the first thing you would do is what's inside the parentheses. And then once you are inside the parentheses, you would start over. There's no parentheses, so then you would do exponents. There's no exponents, that you would multiply from or divide left to right. And so that's what they're doing here. So we're going to do that first, and that's where that 27 comes from. And as we're working through these problems, particularly in investigation 4, please write everything down like they did here. They wrote that very first step. They rewrote, you notice, they rewrote everything else. So nothing changed except for that 6 times 4.5 changed to 27. And you want to do that all throughout this investigation, right? It's very important that you're writing everything down. And that's not for me. If you come and ask me kind of where did I go wrong, yes, that work is really helpful in me helping you. But the work is primarily only for you. Because if you're skipping these steps and you get something wrong, it doesn't make sense. You have something to go back to. And you're less likely to make mistakes if you're writing all of your work out as well. So it's extremely important that you do that. And then from here to here, we're inside parentheses still. So from there to there, all they did was simplify 27 minus 9 is 18. And now we are multiplication division. There's no parentheses. Multiplication division from left to right. So we take 18 divided by 3. That's where that 6 comes from. Now we're at addition, subtraction, left to right, 13.5. Now, this does not seem like it's too difficult, and it isn't if you take your time and you think smart about what's going on and you do one step at a time. Don't try to do 2 or 3 steps at a time. Do one step at a time. That will minimize your mistakes and errors here. All right, so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at in this investigation. So let's get started, or in this investigation. So let's get started. And we've already talked about, so if you need in your notes, go ahead and pause it and copy these things down. We're looking at order of operations. And we've already talked about the order of operations. That's the PEMDAS that we talked about. That should already be in your notes. The parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, left to right, addition, subtraction, left to right. That should already be in your notes, okay? And so looking at this, we're playing a game in learning the order of operations. Okay, it's a game called Dealing Up, where a player draws 4 cards. The player uses all 4 cards to write a number sentence that gives the greatest possible result. Right, so one of the questions that we're trying to answer looks like this. What's the greatest result you can make from 2 of the following numbers? What if you use 3 numbers? What if you use 4 numbers? And you just have to keep these properties that we've been talking about this entire time in your mind. Like, for example, just glancing at this, if I multiply these 2 together, first of all, I know that it's going to be a positive number, and so that's going to give me a very large positive number. If I were to decide to do instead, this one and this one, right? Because like, oh, a negative times a positive, that's a positive. No, it's a negative. So those properties that we've been learning are very important as well, right? So on part A, Jamar and Elena are playing Dealing Up. Jamar draws the following 4 cards, right? And you're exploring what he's doing and whether or not he's doing some of these correctly using those order of operations. So Jamar writes 5, so he writes this, 5 minus negative 6 times 4 plus negative 3 is equal to 41. Elena says the result should be 26. Who is correct? So take a minute, copy down what I highlighted there in green. Try it. See if you get 41. See if you get 26. See if you get something different. Pause the video and then come back. So if we take the time and write this out and then work it out, you notice the first thing that we have to do, there's no parentheses. Yes, there's parentheses, but those parentheses don't show any operations inside of them. It just shows that these are negative numbers. So the first thing we're going to do is multiply the negative 6 times 4, and that's where the negative 24 comes from. And then the next step, I just changed the minus and negative to plus a positive. And now there's no more multiplication, so you add, subtract, left to right. So then 5 plus 24, that's where the 29 came from. 29 plus negative 3, 26. So Elena was actually right on this one. Then on part 2, it says Elena starts by writing negative 3 minus negative 6 plus 5 to the 4th. What is her result? So go ahead and copy this down, try it on your own, and then come back to see how you did.
It's Zinga.
So when we take a look at this one and write it out, the first thing that we're going to do is 5 to the 4th. And I don't expect anyone to know that off the top of your head, but you can multiply 5 by itself 4 times, so you get 625. So that's the exponents. There are no parentheses, again, other than showing that this is a negative number. And then you go ahead and do the exponents, and then once you're done with that, you look at what's remaining, you rewrite it, and it's all adding, subtracting. So now we add, subtract left to right. So the first thing we're going to do is take negative 3 plus 6, gives us 3, and then 3 plus 25, that gives us 28. All right, and then on the third one it says insert parentheses into negative 3 minus negative 6 plus 5 to the 4th to give a greater result than in part 2. So what can we do to make it even larger than 628? So go ahead and take a minute or two to kind of think about this. You're adding parentheses into here because the parentheses change the order in which you compute things, right? Because wherever you put parentheses, you're going to do what's inside there first before you do anything else. So go ahead and see if you can't add some parentheses to make it bigger than 628. So here what I did, there might be more than one answer, but what I did is I took all of this stuff in here, which when you simplify it down, it equals 8, and took it to the power of 4. So I just took parentheses, and parentheses and brackets are the same thing. They're the same thing. I use brackets, you use parentheses, that's fine. But if you simplify all that, that's 8 to the 4th, and 8 to the 4th is actually larger than 5 to the 4th. Now what I want you to do is go ahead and rewrite all of these in your notes, 1 through 6. Rewrite them exactly as they are, and then work them out step by step. Okay, make sure that you are taking your time and rewriting them as you go along. Come back to the video and see how you did. Now, sometimes, like on number 1, you can look at that and know what you're going to have to do first. So sometimes, in my mind, what I'll do is I'll throw parentheses in there. Okay, that says that I'm going to do this first. And so when I take 7 times 4, I know that that's going to be negative 28. And then I'm going to add 8 divided by 2, because when you're multiplying, dividing left to right, that's what you're going to do. Multiply this and then divide 8 divided by 2, and that is 4. And now we can put those together. That's negative 24 on that first one. All right, so sometimes on these, not all of them, and you don't have to either move left to right. If you put parentheses, sometimes it'll help you identify what to do first. All right. And then on number 2, the first thing that we're going to do is what's inside those parentheses. So that's going to be 5 to the 2nd. Then you would have times 6 minus 1. 5 to the 2nd, that's an exponent. We still have to do that first. So that would be 25 times 6 minus 1. And then 25 times 6, then minus 1. So that's 150. Minus 1 is equal to 149. Okay, so make sure you're writing each up. I like vertical, so if you can do it vertically, that's best, but with my little less space here, that makes it difficult for me to do. And then the same is true for all of these fractions with decimals. Order of operations remains the same. Remember what I said at the beginning of the video, it's no different, right? Order of operations remains the same. And so if you check the next two, you should have negative 111 in the 5th. And then on number 4, you should have negative 5, right? So because on this one, you have to do this first and then multiply it by 8 and then add 3. And then here you would do, actually you would do this first. That gives you 5 to the 3rd, 125. And then you would take 2 2/5 times 4.5 and subtract 25, then add 3. Now on 5, looking at this order, we would do, there's 2 sets of parentheses, right? We don't do anything with this outside yet. And even with this one, we have to do what's inside, and that's going to give us negative 2, negative 5 plus 3. And then we work outside of, so 4 minus negative 2, that gives us 6. So you'd have negative 8 times negative, or sorry, just 6. Yeah, not negative. And then that gives us negative 48. So when there's multiple steps or sets of parentheses, you just start over. Inside parentheses, inside parentheses, inside parentheses, until there are no parentheses inside parentheses. Then you start with exponents. And then on the last one, working through the order of operations, you would do this first. And then from left to right, you would take negative 16 divided by 8. Then you would take that answer, which is negative 4 times 2 to the 3rd. And then you would subtract 7, and you should get negative 23 on that last one. Okay, like I said, they are seemingly simple, but they can get rather complex fairly quickly. So please take your time and write out all of your work here. So on these next ones, these are challenge ones. You can do as many of these or as few of these as you want. I would recommend doing at least 2 of them to challenge yourself. And what you're doing is you're finding the greatest and the least possible values. You're finding both of them, not by changing the numbers, but just by adding in parentheses into your into that expression there, just throwing parentheses in there. So go ahead and try number 1. Look for the greatest and then the least. So write this down in your notes and then look for the greatest and the least, and then come back to the video. So the green is the greatest and the red is the least here. And so when we're looking for the greatest, I went ahead and I put parentheses around all of the numbers because 7 minus 2 plus 3 is 8. And then when you take 8 squared, that gives you 64. That would be the greatest. And then the least was to put parentheses around the 2 plus the 3, which is what I did here. Because 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 squared is 25. And then 7 minus 25 gave me negative 18. So were you able to find the greatest and the least here? Or at least one that's bigger and one that's smaller, just by adding in parentheses? Go ahead and try 2, 3, and 4. Like I said, if you want to try one other one, that's great. You don't have to do all of them, but challenge yourself and do all of them if you have time. Go ahead and do 2, 3, and 4. So here are the rest of them. Like I said, this is optional to do any more than 2. But on number 2, if you group the 4.6 and the 2.8 together, that will give you the largest possible, 339 and 2/3. And then if you group the 7 minus 2 together, that'll give you the smallest possible, which is just 60. On number 3, if we group the negative 3.12 plus 21.3 together, that gives us the largest, which is 151.3. And then on 3 also, grouping it a little bit differently, if you take the 25 times 3.12, put that in parentheses, meaning you have to do that first, and then add 21.3 divided by 3, you get negative 70.9. And then if you look at the last one and grouping these two, the 178 with the negative on the outside gives you 44.07, and then adding no parentheses gives you the smallest value on that one. Okay, then on D, it says Rodrigo performs the following computation. His answer is 29. Explain how Rodrigo obtained his answer. Whether it's right or not, I don't think that's what we're looking for. It's just throw some parentheses in there and show us how he got 29. So similar to up there, but you're trying to get a target number of 29. Go ahead and copy this in your notes and see if you can't throw some parentheses in there. I'll give you a hint. It's one set of parentheses and get 29. So if you group the 3 and the 2 together right here, and when you add those together, that's 5, then 5 times 7, and then that gives you 35. 35 minus 6, that gives you 29. And so that's how he got 29. So it says, is Rodrigo's answer correct? That means we're going to take this up here, the 3 plus 2 times 7 minus 6. Work that out like it's supposed to be worked out and see if you get the same thing. Pause the video, try that, and then come back and see how you did. So if you tried this, you notice you have to do the 2 times 7 first. So it would be 3 plus 14 minus 6 on this one, and then it's going to be 17 minus 6, because then you would add left to right, add or subtract left to right, and he should have gotten 11 if he would have done it correctly. And then on E, use the order of operations to find the value, show your work. So this is a long one, step by step, so copy it out exactly like it is, step by step, work through the parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, left to right, addition, subtraction, left to right, and see if you can get to the correct value. Okay, so if you can do this and get to what I was able to get to, you are on the right track here. So let's see how we did on first thing that we're going to do right here. Whoop, let me do this. First thing that we're going to do is you have to take that 4 times 5, and that's where that 20 came from. But I also looked in here. Oops, I'm sorry. I guess I did 2 steps on this first one, because I also looked saying, hey, there's the only exponent. And so I know that that's going to be 49, and then I'm going to start in left to right doing multiplication. So I guess I did 2 steps in one on that first one. Apologies. So that's 49 right there. And then 4 times 5, that's where that 20 comes from. And then you start multiplying, dividing left to right. So 20 divided by 2, that's where that 10 comes from. 10 times 3, that's where that 30 comes from. And then 6 divided by 3, that's where that 2 comes from. 3 plus 30, that's where that 33 comes from. 33 minus 49, negative 16. Negative 16 plus 2 is negative 14. So again, is this difficult? No, but at the same time, it is not simple. So please show your work. Please write things out. Please do one step at a time. Again, apologize. I did 2 steps on the first one. I would recommend not doing that until you become more of an expert on these properties of mathematics. And that is it for the order of operations, which is extremely important moving forward in the story of mathematics and how all these moving parts fit together in this wonderful story of God.